Hey y'all, welcome back to Confederate Shop's YouTube channel. So today I initially wanted to do a book review on the latest title that we've just added to our shop called Defending Dixie's Land, but unfortunately I am completely out of stock of this book. Now if you've placed an order within the past week or two for it, don't be alarmed. I will have more sometime this week, maybe early next week, so I'll get those back orders shipped out. But before I do a book review, I want to make sure I read the entire thing. I'm about halfway through right now. And I also want to have it in stock. So stay tuned for a book review on that title. Now this week I've also added about 7 new titles to ConfederateShop.com. And the subjects range from Holt Collier to Confederate spies and the coastal defense of Texas and a few other really notable titles that are going to be really interesting reads. You can find those in my newsletter on my website. But today I wanted to talk about a more obscure book, one that does not catch the attention of very many of my customers, especially when they come to the store. And which is why I'm going to make this book half off this week. It's about Isaac Handy. And Isaac Handy was a preacher, and he was also speaking out against the Lincoln administration at the beginning of the war. And for doing so, he was imprisoned at a place called Fort Delaware. And the book is going to talk about his experiences. The title of this book is Imprisoned for Conscience Sake. And it is a phenomenal book. What's unique about this book that I'm featuring this week is that it is a private memoir from Handy himself. And just to tell you a little backstory of Isaac Handy, he was a Presbyterian minister from Portsmouth, Virginia. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't leading charges on a battlefield. He was a preacher. And he was arrested because he had, and I quote, disloyal language against the Union authorities. He simply spoke his mind, and he refused to compromise his convictions. As the federal government did with a lot of Confederate prisoners, they gave them an ultimatum. They told Handy, you can take the oath of allegiance to the United States and you'll go free, or you can remain loyal to the Confederacy and remain in prison. Now, most people who are facing a prison cell would have swallowed their pride and taken it, but Handy refused to do that. He believed that the oath would be a betrayal of his conscience and really everything that he stood for. So he refused, and they shipped him off to Fort Delaware. This place was not exactly a summer camp. You can imagine there were cramped cells, poor food, there was disease running rampant, and there were men dying all around you, as were most Union prison camps. They had the medicine, they had the blankets, they had the doctors, they had the food, they had sources for clean water, but many times they made the Confederate prisoners' experience very, very miserable. And Handy details that in his book. But what's more important is the spiritual ministry that Handy took part of while he was at Fort Delaware. And that is the most powerful part of his diary. It's the reflection on this kind of freedom. Outwardly, he was a prisoner in chains, but inwardly, he was free. Free because he had stayed true to his conscience, because he was following the will of God and what his calling was, and preaching and ministering to many of the soldiers that were there with him. Thankfully, after about 15 months, he was finally released. And when you look back on his time in prison, he had a quote in the book where he says that the gray uniforms that the soldiers still wore, the ragged, worn-out uniforms, they had never looked more dignified and honorable, because to him, the suffering that they had endured that had broken them, it made them shine all the more because they were standing for what they believed. His is a story of faith, of conviction, and a man who decided that freedom of conscience was worth more than freedom of the body. And that's what makes this book a powerful read. It's a long one, but it's a necessary one. If you're a minister, this book is good for you. If you're an enthusiast and are curious about Confederate prisoners of war, this is a great title. It's going to dive into much of the details of camp life within the prison. the experiences with guards, the experiences of exchange, what happened with food and water and sanitary conditions. It all is talked about in this book, but he especially highlights the faith of the men and the ministry that he had while in prison. This is a big book. This is an old Lloyd Sprinkle historical reprint, so it is printed on archival paper, acid-free archival paper. The binding is Smith-bound premium binding. It's a beautiful hardback book. This thing is supposed to retail for $40, and it's definitely worth that. This week, because it is such an obscure book, I'm making this half off, which is a huge deal. I'm not going to have this book forever. So if you want a copy, now is your time to get it. Again, I want to thank everyone for following my work here on ConfederateShop.com. I sincerely appreciate your support, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.